welcome everybody to today's meeting of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. We're carrying over a Karakia that was said this morning in a meeting, and I've been informed there's a quorum present. And I just wish to advise just a change in the order of business. Agenda item 8.5, Bancorp report with David Walker and Jamin. We'll take that first after the item 8.5. And also agenda items 8.8, the Kōrero staff survey result 2023 will be moved to public excluded and taken after the agenda. Item at 9.2.5, legal update, August 2023. As further information will be provided to the committee that meets the requirements under section 7.2a of Lagoima that needs to be withheld to protect the privacy of natural persons. I want to assure this committee and the public that the report and the open agenda will remain available. Any additional information will be released from PX with the agreement and resolution of the committee under Standing Order 18.4 and 18.5. Apologies. I have an apology from Councillor Sunkel and Chair Scott. Any other apologies? None. Just want to say at the beginning, I note that there are some councillors in attendance today. I ask that you ask no questions or participate in the meeting. You're welcome to stay to listen to the deliberations. Conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest? None. Public forum, deputations and petitions. There are none. Extraordinary and urgent business. There's no extraordinary and urgent business. No notices of motion. We'll now move to item 7.1. 7.1. Are there any? These are the previous minutes on page 9 to 14 of the agenda. Are there any matters of accuracy relating to the minutes? All fine. I'll put the resolution that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee 1 confirms the minutes of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee meeting held on the 7th of June 2023. There are no corrections. For someone to move that, please. Councillor Robinson, Councillor Southworth. Is there any discussion? None. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? No. Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item 8. Item 8 is the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee Resolution Status Report, August 2023. Catherine, are there any? If there's any questions of clarification on that, it's fairly straightforward. Any questions from members of the committee? None. Thank you. I'll put the motion then that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee notes the status of previous resolutions provided in the status of Audit, Finance and Risk Committee Resolutions Report, August 2023. We have a mover for that. Councillor Kōrero, seconder. Councillor Southworth. No further discussion on that. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item 8.2. Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. We'll move to David on the Bancorp issue, item 8.5. So if we just move to item 8.5. Welcome, David. and Jim Thomas, who's the team lead of corporate reporting, will be assisting as well.
Good afternoon, all. Pleasure to be here once again. Now, for those looking for an uplifting session on the outlook for the New Zealand economy and for interest rates, you're probably in large part going to be sorely disappointed. But that's just the way it is. So anyway, I've got a lot of slides that I can potentially talk to, but I thought I'd just run through some key points, welcome any questions, and sort of answer the stuff that you see as important for your council. Does that seem fair? Okay, so just as a sort of background for those that don't know me, so Bancorp's role is to advise council on all things interest rates, both in terms of its borrowings and in terms of its investments and in the way it funds itself. So that's our brief, and that's our job. So that's kind of the frame of reference for this sort of conversation. So probably as you know, New Zealand's sort of facing a sort of a tough spell at the moment, very weak economic growth, sort of fringing on sort of recession. One of the positives, though, in terms of the outlook is that migration is improving and improving quite dramatically. If we believe the forecast from the economists at Westpac, then potentially New Zealand could have an increase of over 100,000 sort of immigrants, net migration coming into New Zealand this year, which for a country the size of 5 million is a big number. So I personally find that number quite interesting because a lot of the news items talk about the number of Kiwis that are leaving New Zealand, but there's a lot of other people coming back into New Zealand as well. So I think that's a positive for the country. I think so just some key points from the slide here, and again, just to give you a barometer for what's happening in the economy. A third of New Zealand retailers don't expect to survive over the next 12 months. And also too, in terms of from a government books point of view, which has implications for the council as well, we're expecting to see a significant deterioration in the government's finances. Now that won't affect you as a council. I find that really interesting in terms of, well, it will affect you as the ability for government to support local government will be put under strain, I think, over the next few years, and particularly when we think about the Three Waters sort of situation, which doesn't directly affect you, but it has indirect impacts on other local councils. So I think that's something that could be potentially significant. And it will be interesting over the next 6 months if we do say a change in government in terms of what the rules will be in terms of how councils are able to generate revenue. Because I think one of the big issues that New Zealand faces is, who is going to foot the bills for climate remediation, those sorts of things. As we know, they're big ticket amounts. I just took this section on New Zealand interest rates. Kind of the good news is that the Reserve Bank thinks its job is largely done in terms of raising rates. But what we've got to remember is that we had a low of 0.25%. Only it was 19-20 months ago. Now we're sitting at 5.5%. From an historical and an absolute perspective, that change in interest rates is hugely significant. What the really challenging thing is, now we've got rates at the level where the Reserve Bank believe it's happy is how long will it take for the high interest rates and the weaker economy? So higher rates leads to a weak economy. The question is, how long do the weak economy take for that to translate into a lower inflation? And if we look at the Reserve Bank statement that was only last week, they don't believe they'll be able to cut rates until March, June of 2025. So we could see these rates stay, high for longer. Again, just for your reference, just some key graphs that the Reserve Bank provided last week. This graph here might have interest for those. Well, yes, it will be of interest. One of the bright spots in terms of the New Zealand economy was the rural sector. However, only in the last 6 weeks, the plunge in particular dairy prices has been really significant. So we're going to see a sort of situation where the bulk of New Zealand dairy farmers will be running at a loss next year, and they face an extremely challenging outlook. And again, it shows you the fickleness of the market. You know, a year ago, everyone was, you know, that sector was a true bright spot for the economy, and now it's a real headwind for the economy. Just as a guide, I was talking to one of New Zealand's largest corporate dairy farmers, and as a snapshot last year, and again, this goes back into the government's tax take. They were paying around about 13-14 million in tax last year. This year, they're expecting to pay maybe 2 million at most. That graph there just shows the how quickly the dairy prices have fallen back.
Don't underestimate the change in lamb meat price as well on the rural economy.
Yeah. That's a broader view of commodity price. Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? So, yeah. And look, ladies and gentlemen, that's just kind of graphs showing how much interest rates have moved. What I think is important, even though we've seen a situation where it looks like the Reserve Bank is happy with where short-term rates are, we've seen a really big and pronounced change in the longer-term rates, which are really driven by what's happening in the US. So there's a phrase that I often talk about, and that is, it doesn't matter till it matters. So we've got a situation where, again, a year ago, no one was concerned about the level of US government debt, how they were going to fund themselves. Now it is basically the number one issue for global investors and how they're pricing US debt. And as a consequence of that, Fitch downgraded the US about 3 weeks ago. Obviously, it's still got a very good rating, but as a signal to the US, I think it's quite compelling. And the important thing for us is that New Zealand interest rates, we're kind of, the US is kind of default, or it's default interest rate, and New Zealand rates are priced on that. So when investors are basically looking at where they're going to place their money, that's basically US rates plus a margin for whatever country they're investing in. So it is significant. This is a graph for ECAN. Basically shows from a policy point of view that, and this, we updated this in the last couple of days, that it's well within its policy. It doesn't have to do anything, so it is well protected against any increase in interest rates, and it won't be forced to do anything in terms of locking in long-term rates at what is a reasonably unattractive sort of levels. I think something I do find interesting from an ECAN perspective, even though the debt levels as of a couple of days ago were 85 million, as of the end of June, it had 30-odd million in cash. So those headline numbers, I actually think, distort the true level of debt that the council holds. And these were just some sort of comments that I thought would be relevant for yourselves, and these were some of the topics that we were working on over the last quarter. So we've implemented a new bank facility for the council's liquidity requirements. And just some background to this, the council does all of its borrowing through the LGFA. LGFA has a requirement where it has to have 110% of liquidity. So effectively that means is if the council borrows 100 million, it has to have $10 million in cash or $10 million in terms of uncommitted or available bank facilities. So it's really used there as a liquidity measure. It probably won't be used that much. It's a very cheap facility. And we just see it as kind of best practice of trying to optimize your liquidity. Like most regional councils, it has a situation, it has very lumpy sort of cash flows coming in and coming out. So therefore, it's great to have that as a sort of a peace of mind tool for borrowing funds. Because even, for example, if you want to borrow money from LGFA, it has to be for a term of 30 days. Whereas this facility, you can use it for 1 or 2 days if needed. Interest rate swap facilities have been put in place. There were already some in place, but we've got a situation where we've got a competitive process with facilities with ASB and ANZ. We entered into a $6 million swap, which was from September 26 to September 29. That rate was at 409. When I looked at that yesterday, a day before yesterday, that was at 465. So we did very well. And from a competitive point of view, when we compared the two banks, there was a saving of 17,400 between the two. So it just shows the value of having a competitive process from your banking facilities. And that is a real quick snapshot. I think stuff I think is important for yourselves, but I look forward to any questions.
Thanks, David. Graham?
First question, that's the new ANZ facility. I'm surprised that we didn't get a policy and rationale paper coming through to this committee, as under our terms of reference 6.1a, we need to consider the financial policies and processes. So I got a bit of a surprise when I opened up the papers to see that that's there, sitting within there without any sort of pre-signalling coming through this committee.
I can have a chat with Brian. So Brian's the CFO who's currently away today, and we can look to resolve that matter and advise maybe at the next committee meeting.
A bit late now, it's in place.
To be fair, the ANZ swap facilities have been in place for probably 4 years plus. So it's not that's not a new one. But the ASB facility is effectively a new facility.
For I understand $10 million. Is that right?
Sorry, apologies. I thought we were talking about the swap facility. So no, the $10 million liquidity facility, yes, you'll have to clarify it with Jamina.
Kōrero, can you just repeat what you just said in response to this question here, that you're going to go back now to the Chief Operating or the CFO? Is that right?
Yes, I'll go back to the CFO, Brian, just to kind of confirm and understand it, and we can acknowledge Graham's question and get an answer to that.
Sorry, but to me, through the chair, that's not good enough. Because basically what we've got, we could be in contravention actually of a something that's quite clear on what the process is. And it's about a report back actually to this committee, and that hasn't happened. Is that what I'm hearing?
I would have to confirm with Brian on that. He would be closer to that.
Stephanie,
Thank you, Chair. Through you, noting the independence and Councillor Kōrero's, I don't have the answer for that. I'm just trying to support our staff member. The CFO is on leave, Jim's team leader. So I will take that on myself as your chief executive to do that and to give you that assurance back. That is why the response has been given. I don't have an answer for you, but I will get you one. Your concern is about the decision-making, Councillor Kōrero, I believe. Yep. So there's two things here. One is that we've already actioned this, as the independent has indicated. And so I'd need to come back to you anyway. And in terms of further decisions on this paper, I believe it's receives the report as opposed to further decisions, if I'm not mistaken.
Just through the chair, just as long as we're all clear that we're not contravening any point around the process. So have we jumped actually without actually coming back through this committee? That's what we kind of want to know.
yeah, thanks, Nook, for that. We definitely need to have an understanding of the process that was gone through for these two items, swap rate and the 10 million additional borrowings, to check on that. Was it correct? Were the appropriate delegations in place to do that, or should it have come back through us? And so I'm just wondering if we could just minute that the CE will follow up to check on process. Graham?
Just to be clear, my only concern was the new borrowing, but hearing the reasons, I actually don't have a problem with the reasons. It is purely process. It seems to make perfect sense with the rationale that's been set out by our friends from Bancorp, and that wasn't actually reflected in the papers that came through.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Are there any further questions of David? Graham?
Thank you, Chair. In your presentation, first of all, thank you very much for a very good presentation yet again. In there, you've quoted the current LGFA rates, and you've also put on a table where you've set out what the current profile of the debt of ECAN is. It would be very helpful because in this paper, the interest cost is moving very rapidly. For this committee to be aware of what the forecast future movements are likely to be based on the information known today, because that's going to be increased rates that are going to have to be, not discretionary, have to be raised in order to satisfy those funding obligations.
Fair enough. Yeah, I can include a graph. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to say the only issue is that those numbers are moving around on a daily basis projection. But as a point in time, I can understand, and because that's all we've got to make.
Yeah, and that's all I want. But that does give an indication. That's the best information we have available. What the volatility is going to be based on that information.
So I was thinking there's a graph there where we can model what we think that what the market is saying the 90-day rate will be, and then what implications for council's cost of funds going forward. Yeah.
Thanks for those questions. Yeah, I was looking at the previous charts you've given us in December 22 and March 23, and the alarming change in such a short time frame of interest rates. So obviously things have perhaps stabilised a wee bit, but yeah, it's quite significant when you look at the two previous reports that you've given, how they've jumped so high.
Yeah, well, as I said, from a historical and absolute perspective, the movement of rates has been staggering. So,
Through you, Mr. Chair, a comment on the interest rate movement, and really the extension of that is the factors that we should be considering in the forthcoming LTP, the impact on our annual plan budgets, etc., because we can only spend the ratepayers' money once, and we have no choice on that spend. So we've got to do a balancing exercise. The second one was just in the recommendation that we note the paper. We should also be noting that on page 44, the policy bands, Bancorp is advising us that we are compliant with our policies. That should be built into the recommendation, if I may suggest.
Graham? Yeah, I think that might be useful. Councillor McKenzie?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. In your reflections on international trends and things, have you got a view as to whether some of the bad news that's coming out of China, not so much for our markets, but for some of the property investments over there, have you got a view as to what effect that might have on longer term interest rates? If the answer is no.
That could take a long time to answer. It is one of the key topics for the market at the moment, particularly the property sector. The Chinese are trying really hard to prop up their economy. Their life is not being made easier by the Americans about onshoring a lot of the production back to the US. Can I make an off-the-record comment on that? Is that appropriate or public meeting? Okay. All I can say to that is bigger picture is that some demographic experts. Experts will use them carefully, basically saying that current population of China is 1.3, 1.4 billion. Some of the forecasts have that population by 2050 at around 800 million people. So when you think about that in terms of the context of the world economy, and you think about that in the context about what New Zealand produces, that's something that I think about a lot.
So with specific reference, going back to Graham's questions about interest rates, do you think what's happening in China is likely to extend the period of high interest rates, or is it too early to tell at this point?
China potentially, any weakness in China would be reflected globally, which could potentially mean interest rates fall quicker than what they would otherwise. Fall quicker, yes.
Thank you. There are no more questions. I'll put the motion. Motion that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee receives the report from Bancorp Treasury Services to the 30th of June 2023. And secondly, notes that on page, with an amendment, notes that on page 44 of the agenda, Bancorp advised Environment Canterbury is compliant within policy. I'll move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Robinson? Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, David. Thanks, Jamie. We'll now move back to item 8.2.
Thank you. So I'll take the paper as read. But in terms of the key highlights of the paper, there were two key valuations, the forestry asset valuation and the ETS valuation. The ETS valuation was the key big mover, I guess, for this year. So that declined in value by approximately 10 million due to some uncertainty in the market around potential reformation of the scheme, which ultimately led to a loss hitting the accounts of Environment Canterbury. And in respect to the forestry revaluation, that declined by approximately 430k due to the revaluation process. The methodology was consistent with the prior year, but the reason for the decline was there were some additional costs that were captured in the valuation model due to inflation, which ultimately drove the assets slightly downwards. And then lastly, just with respect to the provisions, which is the provision that's noted in the paper, there was a Healthier Homes Canterbury interest refund provision. So in the prior year, that was approximately 1 million. That declined to about 700k in the current year. And that 700k figure reflects the current figure that we're starting to repay people in the 23-24 financial year. So happy to take any questions with respect to that paper.
McGlynn.
I posed a couple of days back quite a number of questions on the valuations, and without our senior execs in finance available, I think it's probably a little unfair to raise them and place them upon you. But I've got some quite significant questions that I don't have answered at this stage, which caused me some concerns. I also think the paper doesn't actually go far enough. There is another provision that this committee's been made aware of in Public Excluded, so I won't get specific, which I don't see mentioned at all in the papers or the PX portion. Generally, I don't think the papers have actually got enough information that would satisfy my auditor's brain, and therefore potentially our auditors. And I think we're going to need to go back and revisit these papers, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Chairman, do you want to answer that?
Just in respect, you're correct. So the provision noted here is one of the provisions. The other provision, as you noted, probably not to discuss at this current time, but will be noted in the next AFRC committee paper, where a bit more wording and information can be shared on that one, particularly around the disclosure in the accounts.
The next AFRC committee meeting is scheduled for the 1st of November, which is after the adoption of the financial statement. So there may need to be some work done sooner than that, and potentially a out of cycle discussion.
I was of the understanding that it was the 4th of October, but I might be incorrect on that. So maybe someone can.
Thanks, Jamin. It sounds to me like that might be a good idea, Graham, that we have a out of cycle discussion just to talk about these issues where there's a little bit of uncertainty. And I think if we could minute that.
I believe Jamila is correct. I apologise. The next meeting appears to be 4th of October, as you suggested. So my point is not valid.
It may still be useful to have an out of cycle discussion on those issues anyway, and so that when it comes to the October meeting, there's some resolution to it. Graham, no?
Thank you, Chair. We need to also make sure that the resolution, the timing of this resolving these issues, is before the audit commences. And because the auditors will want to see that the AFRC have approved the incorporation of these valuations in the financial statements, and they've approved the provisions as well. Can I also ask that in future the committee gets the full copy of the valuations, as is best practice? And can I just question whether getting finance to do the valuation of the forestry credits when actually complies with the accounting standards, because the government has had 3 failed auctions of these credits. So I would question whether that's a sufficiently credible source. And all you've done is an arithmetic exercise to multiply the number of credits the council has by the latest value. And I don't think that is compliant with the accounting standard, which you've been at pains to in your paper to promote.
The approach is consistent with what we've done in previous years, but obviously in Audit New Zealand have been comfortable, but yes, we're happy to relook at that and see if there's a more appropriate approach. And Brian might be able to better answer that, I guess, on his return as well.
I'm sorry, those failed auctions haven't occurred before.
Yeah, noted, and maybe that's something we can add to those discussions, as you mentioned, to occur before the next meeting.
Thanks, Jamin. Councillor McKenzie, then Councillor McGlynn. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, I value the opinions that the two Grahams bring to this table in their speciality skills. So when they ask questions to our team, staff, can those questions be circulated to the whole of the committee? Because that then helps us understand the issues that they're raising. So I'd really like to see the questions that the two Grahams have raised on this valuation issues put in front of all this committee.
And I think that would be something that we can have as a outside circular discussion to canvass those issues.
But I mean, as the the chair or the secretariat for this committee, that should be happening anyway.
We'll note that. And I understand in terms of the audit, the audit is, I think, underway already. So obviously we need to bring forward a bit of a discussion session reasonably quick. Look.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. I support what Councillor McKenzie has just brought up, and it's been noted And then what I'm hearing here though is that I would also, as a member of this committee, it'd be really good to actually understand how much oversight our two independent committee members are actually getting. Yep. Because what I'm feeling here is that maybe this is just me, but it's kind of feeling like a mushroom scenario here, but I don't know. Let's have a look at it.
Thanks, Councillor Kōrero. I agree. I think there's a feeling that our two independents are providing some valuable questioning and dialogue with us, and perhaps increasing that dialogue certainly in this first round of discussions. Any further questions? Councillor McGlynn. Oh, sorry, Graham McGlynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the promotion. I guess being slightly geekish for a moment, and so I apologise to the councillors that are not accountants, but I do feel that we may have moved into a tier 3 potentially in the hierarchy, and I'll be interested in the auditor's comment in due course. I don't expect one today on the ETS valuation basis. The second one that sits underneath the forestry, which I think is something for everyone to think about, is that we have a valuation from woodlands, which I'm told that it's on the same basis as in the past. But again, the world to some extent has changed slightly with the flooding up north, and we ought to be thinking about, is the valuation being done in line with the way that this council, and you may not have a policy yet on it, would intend the harvest to be managed with the slash issue and that sort of thing. I realise we're not predominantly on steep ground, but we are adjacent to major river systems. So I think that's a wider issue that this council needs to think about, is the policy associated with how are the forests managed, and does the valuation process reflect those policies and the costs associated, because it is a discounted cash flow valuation.
Thanks, Graham. Yes, I'm sure there was somewhere where the amount of the loss and the replacement of some of our forestry used for flood protection is obviously a big cost. So it's how those are handled going forward, I think would be important.
I think Graham is actually specifically referring to an increase in cost of harvesting due to new regulations, and therefore what that affects the margin and therefore the discounted value.
So referring to slash and the costs associated with that, is that what you were meaning?
Chair, yes, and the fact that the assumptions in the model that the valuers are using to value our forests actually reflects what ECAN's practice might be. And I'm unsure whether we have any policies at this. This might be a future work stream, given what's happened in the last 12 months, particularly up in the north, to say what are the environmental standards that we wish to apply to the management of our forests, and do the valuations and the discounted cash flows along the way reflect that. And slash to me is not just at harvest, it's also all the tree trimming on the way through to create the forest valuation. So it's an ongoing, are we letting it drop? And if we get a major flood, is there a risk that we could have slash going down the rivers from tree trimming rather than final harvest? So there's a whole range of issues. I think the industry is still trying to get its head around it, and it's very much an evolving topic out there.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
I was actually wondering if the current slash situation actually, is there a cleanup that is in on the cards for before the next harvest, when the policies come into place. Because there's a lot of sort of residual slash from past forestry operations that are there. And is this the cost of that cleanup? Is that included in any of this future forecasting?
I think that's the question that we need some answers to. Councillor Southworth.
This concerns around some of this we've also raised through our annual plan submissions from some of the community. I'm just wondering, does this need a recommendation to say bring back an overview of where we're at within the council to a future paper? Rather than, I mean, I don't know what's the mechanism here, because it is something that's definitely topical and current, and I think it's already been flagged, and there may well be things already being done, but it'd be really good to see that in this committee. And so what's the mechanism to ensure that happens?
There is a proposed updated amendment to resolutions to bring back some more information later date on some of the issues that we've raised here. If there's no further questions, then I'll put the recommendation. There's item 3 there's proposed additional staff recommendation. So I'll read those. That the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee 1 receives the summary of asset valuation reports and asset valuation work performed for the financial year ended 30th of June 2023. And secondly, receives the summary of work performed for financial provision for the financial year ended 30th of June 2023, and notes that a supplementary report on asset valuation work will be provided at the October 2023 Audit, Finance and Risk Committee meeting. Do I have Graham Naylor?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think point 3 adequately covers what was discussed. We raised some questions about valuation work, but we've also raised some concerns about the provisions and the completeness of the work that's been done on that. And we also raised that we didn't have sufficient information to assess whether the healthier homes provision is adequate. So I think that needs to be modified yet again to incorporate those other points.
Thanks, Graham. What we'll do is we'll just adjourn for a few minutes and just get the wording for item 3 reworded with your assistance. Okay, we'll just adjourn for a few minutes. We're just going to end the adjournment and then we'll begin. Okay, I'll re-put these resolutions. That the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee 1 receives the summary of asset valuation reports and asset valuation work performed for the financial year ended 30th of June 2023. Secondly, receives a summary of work performed for financial provision for the financial year ended 30th of June 2023. And notes that a supplementary report on asset valuations, liabilities and other matters discussed will be circulated to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee as soon as it is available and included in the next meeting agenda papers for information. Do I have a mover for that? Graham Naylor. Seconded Graham McGlynn. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item 8.3, health, safety and wellbeing. And who's presenting that? And Tony. Thanks, Tony. If you could report on this for us, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I present the Health and Safety and Wellbeing report to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. Take it as tabled. I do have some highlights to make on the report. The was noted that there is a noticeable uplift in maturity amongst leaders in health and safety. This is a comment by the author based on the observations from Mike Cosman workshop with the ELT, the critical risk workshops that were undertaken and the directors taking part, owning the health and safety by publicly stating the buck stops with me, similar to what Stephanie has also said this morning. The senior leadership, general managers, requiring monitoring of their work activities to ensure that the work is done as it had been said it been done. In addition, they also attended ELT meetings and senior leadership meetings in which those discussions about leadership and health and safety formed the opinion that was expressed in the report. It was also noted that the year in review highlighted extensive progress that's been made in health and safety. That comments based on the fact that 12 months ago there was only one health and safety manager and one health and safety coordinator. There are now 4 in the team, so we have significant capacity for health and safety activities, and that year in review and the items listed in the report demonstrate the activities that have been done. There is significant focus on health and safety, both from our health and safety reps and building capability with those people, as well as empowering them to be a voice for health and safety for their field staff. So those factors led us to believe that there was an uplift in the maturity of health and safety. Another point was about the near misses. It is inconsistent about how many are happening, and it is a continual process to educate and create awareness about the need to report all events, including near misses, so that we can learn from those. So even very mature enterprises and businesses struggle with getting near miss reporting until their culture is well inbred into the reporting culture. There was a comment about having governance, more governance in terms of the health and safety. I understand a paper will be presented in September. Another clarification or comment I'd like to make was about public safety versus employee safety. So our responsibility as an employer is a focus on our employees, but we also have duties as a person who controls a business or undertaking to ensure our work activity doesn't affect other people like public. Our business as usual practices do include public safety. For example, our rivers, parks and forests operations all include caring and managing public and excluding them from our work-related activities so they are not harmed by those activities. That is in our standard operating procedures and our statement of works for our work activity in those areas. The remaining comment I have is about contractor management. It is a business as usual activity for our staff to manage contractors, and we have a second level of assurance from the health and safety team monitoring that our leaders are doing that. It may not have been detailed in the report about those activities, and I'm sure that I'll talk to the health and safety manager and upgrade that reporting function if necessary. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Tony. Graham Naylor.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions about this paper, and I would like to suggest that they are addressed and reported back to the committee subsequently, and then with using the same process that we've just put in place for the valuations and provisions question be handed in for information. I don't accept opinion and hearsay as being acceptable evidence for improved uptick in health and safety. In fact, I don't believe that governors can rely on that. And so I think this committee needs to ask for that to be put in a more evidential basis. So for example, when you talk about attendance at various meetings, you need to tell us how many meetings and what the attendance was, and so on and so forth. I really am not interested in any hearsay. Moving on then to the near miss, just telling us there was a near miss, again, doesn't meet our obligations under the Health and Safety Act. So we need to know some details as to what it was and what has been found to be the cause of it, and what actions the council is taking to address that and make sure it doesn't happen again. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Sorry, yes, I do.
Brian McGlynn.
Great to see that you've got first aid equipment's all been upgraded, ensure all workers and vehicles have fit for purpose kits available. I guess one of my key questions is, is there people with the knowledge to be able to use the equipment, particularly when you're a lone worker sitting out there? Do they have the skill sets available? Have we invested in the training to support the provision of the physical kits there? I imagine that there is a process, but I just like to understand, get an assurance that there is.
Yes, there's a very strong training package in place with competency assessments and the provision of the appropriate equipment that is in place.
Any further question, Councillor Southwood?
Just again to ask on the near misses. So obviously there's some specific ones that are coming through, and that's great. And it'd be really good to know how that's then being treated. But I'm perhaps particularly interested in how are people being taught about what does a near miss look like? When is it something you report, and when is it something that you maybe actually respond to there and then? You know, there's times where it's appropriate to take some action in the situation to remedy something, but also then feed it through. So it'd be good to get a bit of a heads up about how that's being communicated and across everybody. You know, near miss can happen on the stairs carrying a hot drink as much as it can happen out on a building site or wherever else that we might be going. So it'd be good to just get a sense of that, how it's being communicated across the board.
It's all staff are required to attend an induction when starting, and it is delivered in that session. We also want it reinforced at all team meetings, and we publish it in our health and safety newsletter. We also empower our health and safety reps to be our voice for our staff and to encourage near-miss reporting and health and safety matters as well. So it's a ongoing education and awareness exercise throughout the organisation. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. No further questions. I think it's probably there's a lot of interest from councillors and obviously this committee on health and safety issues, and I think I wonder if we could minute the idea of having a further, perhaps having a workshop to discuss some of the issues and concerns that the two independents have of this, but also to help inform councillors generally. I think that would be useful, and we can just work with staff to talk about a program and some of the topics that would be useful to discuss.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. So it's about process again. So there were some key things that have been identified through our independent committee member, one of them, Graham Naylor. So what's happening now is that when we go into PX, then that's when we're going to have a further discussion about this. Because if not, I mean, I think that it needs to be recorded exactly, because what
Graham Naylor has just said is actually reflective of how I'm feeling. Maybe the rest of us as well, not sure. But I don't want to sort of get this kind of thing lost in translation, because it's actually very, very pertinent as to our whole journey with our health and safety. That's how it's reported is the big thing.
I was suggesting it was reported that we have a workshop and minute that. Do you want it as a resolution instead, or are you?
Actually,
Okay, well, we can do that. We'll adjourn for a few minutes and just work out an additional amendment to that effect. Yep. Okay. Adjourning and just prepare an amendment to the resolution. Where we are.
This is just a call that we're out of here.
We're just out of adjournment now, so back into the meeting, and I'll put the resolution and the amended resolution that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee receives the report on health, safety and wellbeing, and secondly, agrees that a workshop will be held with the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee to determine the committee's required health and safety reporting. Do I have a mover? Councillor Kōrero, seconder. Graham Naylor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item 8.6. There's something done 8.4. 8.4, sorry. 8.4, which is the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee Forward Work Plan Update. Tanya's going to talk to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just take the paper as written. I mean, really, the point of this paper was just to bring to you the minor amendments that have been made to the work plan going forward, and those amendments have mainly been made to accommodate the fact that we're going to have 2 consecutive meetings within a very short period, and just kind of spreading the workload a bit.
Tanya, are there any questions on this? Graham Naylor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like 2 amendments made to the proposed revised work plan. The first, I would like to see that the committee gets what I call an accounting estimates and issues paper. I can supply a template of the sort of issues that needs to cover. And secondly, I don't believe that a yearly monitoring of forward gifts and hospitality is adequate. I think it should be at least 6 monthly. Thank you.
Graham McGlynn.
It would be good if we had a column added in here which actually cross-references back to our terms of reference, so that we are actually linking what we're doing with the rationale within our terms of reference, and perhaps then examining the 2 side by side to say, have we got all the right items in this work plan to cover off our obligations under the terms that Council has assigned us.
Councillor Southworth.
A really simple question, but what's the pale yellow for? There's no key.
They're the ones that we have changed.
Any further questions? Graham Naylor. If we note down your, rather than a new resolution, that we note in the minutes your possible amendments to the work plan chart with the inclusion of those issues, or would you like them to be in a resolution? So if we note that in the minutes that the future forward work plan will consider accounting estimates, accounting issues and estimates, and prepare a temp and change monitoring, consider changing monitoring to 6 monthly. You mentioned a template. What's the template? Right, okay. Right, those two things, Councillor, and cross-referencing to terms of reference. Graham, what are you wanting 6 monthly? The actual work plan, or what Graham McGlynn reporting? Gifts and hospitality. That's the last one on the list. Fraud, gift, and hospitality registers to be reported 6 monthly. So those will be noted in the minutes. Okay, well, they'll appear in the minutes. Graham Naylor suggested an accounting estimates paper able to provide a template. A yearly monitoring of forward gifts and hospitality is adequate. It's not adequate. I believe it should be 6 monthly. And Graham McGlynn column added to cross-reference back to terms of reference to ensure that obligations are covered off. Okay. Thank you very much. If there's no further questions on that, Tanya, you may leave the table and I'll put the resolution. That the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee receives the forward work plan and notes the items for which the items which will be presented to the committee at future meetings. Do I have a mover for that? Graham McGlynn. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Southworth. Any further discussion? Councillor Kōrero, are you okay? Yep. All right then. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now we'll move to item 8.6, which is the unaudited draft year end 2022-23 level of service results. And Jessie, thank you for coming to the table for that. Jessie Burgess is Senior Strategy Manager, just standing in for Carmen Marsh.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Through Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present the paper on behalf of Carmen, who's unfortunately had to go home sick today. So the purpose of this paper is to provide an update on the delivery of the annual plan provisional levels of service, results that will be reported in the annual report, and noting, as you said just then, that these are the unaudited draft year end 2022-23 levels of service results. Just a couple of things to note for the committee. For the 39 levels of service that were measured in the 22-23 financial year, 30 were achieved and 9 were not achieved, being provisional results, giving an achievement rate of 77%. And this compares to a forecast achievement rate of 72% at the end of the third quarter of that financial year, and an achievement rate of 63% for the previous financial year. And one level of service was not measured in 22-23. In terms of the targets, of the 99 targets that were measured in 22-23, 88 were achieved and 11 were not achieved, provisional results. giving an achievement rate of 89%, and that compares to an achievement rate of 83% for 21-22, noting that 3 levels of service targets were not measured in 22-23. The main issues affecting the performance in 22-23 financial year were the work program disruptions and changing priorities, the volume and complexity of resource concerning workloads, and the external factors such as labour market pressures, as outlined in the paper as well. Just note the recommendation that the provisional level of service results will be reported in the annual report. So happy to take any questions, Mr. Chair, as best I can answer those on behalf of Carmen.
Graham Naylor.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. When were the significant drop in resource consent processing performance first identified?
Through you, Mr. Chair, apologies, I won't be able to answer that. I'll have to refer to someone else, in one of the directors possibly.
Can I request that information is reported back to the committee, please?
Further questions, Councillor Southworth?
Thank you. On the very bottom of page 51, top of page 52, there's under target 22.1 about preparing a plan in section 32 report for coastal plan, and that's been halted for the now, and that it'll be done sometime later. But do we have an actual date? Do we have some date in mind?
Through Mr. Chair, my understanding is through to 2028. So the work that's been discussed with Te Rauturia, so the work that's happening now is the RPS review and elements of the National Policy Statement on Fresh Water, and then the remainder of that work will be through to 2028.
And so that coastal plan to be completed and then notified at the end of 2028. So it would start work some time before that.
Councillor Karakia.
Tinakwe. Can we just go to the water and land page 51? Just some elaboration. This is actually, and I see that you've got this both 15, 16 are all around Mātauranga Māori work. So the final earlier in the year, internal resourcing constraints meant finalisation was delayed. What were they? Were they from the Rōpūtuia side, or were they from?
Apologies, Mr. Chair, I'm looking to.
I'm just looking to the Tim and David at the back that they've got.
Tim.
It was an internal resourcing within the science group. So the science group were the ones who were leading that piece of work. The person concerned left, and then it took a little while to get somebody up to speed on what was being done.
Right. So it was more around from the science part of it, not so much the actual Mātauranga Māori one, because I know that this the discussion in Otu Wharekai, for instance, a lot of it was actually around the actually science and Mātauranga Māori. I mean, during that discussion, it was actually I thought it was almost there. Obviously, it's not. So is that because of that?
Through you, Chair, that this work is actually contracted to an external contractor to develop a framework for a monitoring program. That's the liaison was between the science member who was effectively running the contract and the external contractor, which was Tipper Associates, and that's where the resourcing constraints went. So it wasn't so much that science was doing it; it was just a liaison between the two.
Page 52 under regional strategic leadership. First point was our resource consent processing, that we achieved 36.2% of resource consents within the accordance with the RMA statutory timeframes, down from 91% in 2021. This is a pretty dramatic core issue. We've had a few heads up, a few meetings back from our chief executive that was very informative about what was happening. Since that point, we've had no reporting back to this committee of how we're going, and this is a key risk that sits for this council. Is this, and the multiple reasons, and some of them are within our control, some of them no doubt are not, but I've got no visibility on this key risk, and we need to get our thinking to look forward to say, yes, we've got an issue. Now, where is it going, and whether it's appropriate for a comment coming in this forum, or whether it's a paper forward for a subsequent meeting for all these key items. It's flagged as red in the next paper, which says it needs the immediate attention of AFRIC, according to their colour guidings. Again, the ones that are orange, and I'm talking through into the next paper, that needs the attention rather than the immediate attention, I think is the wording. So getting consistency and getting the information to support the relevant risks and the scale of the risk to this needs to come back to this committee in a good format.
Thanks, Graham. I think, Stephanie, you're wanting to speak?
Completely right to note that. I will highlight that we have given briefings to the council on multiple times with regard to this. That doesn't take away from your comment, though. It should be here, and it will be here at the next meeting. And I also suggest, Chair, if possible, that we circulate the information that has been provided to councillors to our two independents.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yes, we will do that to bring them up to speed with the discussions that we've had about how we're progressing with the consents process. And we'll do that as quickly as we can. No further questions? I'll put the motion. Thanks, Jesse. That the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee notes the provisional levels of service results for 2022-23 that will be reported in the annual report 22-23. By the mover, Graham McGlynn, seconded Councillor Robinson. Any further discussion? I think we'll just ensure that the matters raised will be noted in the minutes and papers circulated as the CEs suggested. Okay. Okay. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? No. Carried. Thank you. Now I'll move to item 8.7, unaudited draft year-end result 22-23. And Chairman, thank you very much. Standing in for Giles.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the paper as read, but in terms of the key highlights of the paper, so the organisation had an operating surplus of 10.89 million compared to a forecasted surplus of 7.39. So that's a positive variance of 3.5 million. The primary cause of that was due to some additional funding that was received in public transport due to a late central government budget announcement in the year, to which Environment Canterbury obviously benefited. When incorporating the non-operating expenditure, just shy of 16 million, so the operating surplus then dropped down to an organisational result of a deficit of 5 million. And the primary reason for those non-operating expenses were noted in a prior paper with the ETS units and the decline that occurred through that due to some uncertainty in the marketplace there. And then just lastly, we engaged Fitch late in the year just with regards to our credit rating. So that we received the same credit rating that we received in the prior year, the AA+ long-term and the F1+ short-term rating. And the significance of that is it allows us to get reduced borrowing costs or interest rates from the LGFA. So happy to answer any questions on that one.
Thank you. Any questions, Graham McGlynn?
Just again, I'd like to repeat, so apologies there, but bottom of page 79, top of page 80, we've got a traffic light system. And orange is a budget risk event requires the attention of AFRIC due to moderate risk profile for the event. The red is the budget risk requires the immediate attention of AFRIC due to the enhanced risk profile of the event. Two things is, firstly, the papers and supporting information must line up with those. It's very difficult for the committee to give things attention if there's no papers or any background. The second one is when you assess those traffic lights, even if we're on track now for something, if we can see something on the horizon coming at us, we should be flagging that up as an enhanced risk so that we can take mitigating actions and decisions if necessary and recommendations based off management and staff papers to avoid things getting to orange, formally orange. So you might want to have one that's sort of half green, half orange, or to show that there's a trend in the wrong direction. So we've got to get these papers with full support for that actually makes sense with the assessment that's going into them.
Would you like to address that question?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the feedback. That's something we can certainly look to incorporate going forward to give more insights, I guess, within the paper. With regards to the traffic light system as well, maybe some of the wording can be refined a little bit just to reflect what we're trying to show in the paper. But yeah, no, I certainly take your point.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under the it's page, whatever it is, it's where those traffic lights are, and in line with Graham's comments about identifying risk, page 76, the national ticketing design and transition planning activities. If Auckland City or Auckland region to pull out of the national ticketing program, as the mayor up there has flagged he would like to do, what implications would that have on the costs of us implementing that program without Auckland's involvement? Are the budget implications?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I thank you for the question, Councillor. I had a chat with Stuart Gibbon, our General Manager of Public Transport, this morning. So at this stage, those parties that have signed on to the national ticketing solution, there's been no change in terms of Auckland's position on that at this point. So whilst the Mayor may have made a statement in that respect, nothing formal has changed in that respect at this point in time. In terms of some of the cost elements to that, I think that's something that would need to be discussed in terms of the PX discussions that we need to have on the NTS national ticketing solution. So if there are any implications in terms of cost, they need to be worked through.
Well, I mean, and look, I don't know whether the Mayor of Auckland is he's just flag waving or whether it's a real threat. But I sort of my memory from the discussions earlier on is that it needed the whole of New Zealand to be behind us, and we were out front, and we are exposed if other regional councils pull out of the process. So shouldn't we be doing some analysis of that risk just in case the Mayor of Auckland gets his way?
Mr. Chair, that's certainly some feedback I can take back to the team, Jeremy and Giles in that respect. But yeah, certainly that's part of our work that we need to consider if those things change in that respect. So, but at this stage, early indications are that there's no change.
Stephanie, would you like to comment?
Thank you, through you, Chair. And just to add to Jesse's comments, my suggestion is that we do provide you with a brief with regard to the contractual mitigations, because there are mitigations within the contract, irrespective of what Auckland decides to do. Noting that the budget sits with Whakakotahi and the Whakakotahi board in terms of this matter. But coming back to the independence comment with regard to the traffic lights, this is exactly the kind of expectation that you would have, that we note those. And if they cannot be done in public, they must be done in PX. And I think we take that on board. So through you, Chair, we will take that action in future with regard to the traffic lights, but also in terms of the response to you, Councillor McKenzie, we will get you a specific answer so that you know that and you know what the real risks are in this context, because it is a perfectly fair question to ask of us.
Thanks, Stephanie. That's good. We note that. Well, we'll note your comments, Stephanie, in terms of future flagging of orange, red. Yep. Are members in agreement with that? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll put the resolution then, item 8.7, that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee 1 receives the draft year end results report for the year ending 30th of June 2023. I have a mover. Graham McGlynn, seconder. Graham Naylor. Any further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. No. Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to 8.9. It's the Audit New Zealand Audit Fees 2023-25 report. This report's noting the fees. Is there anybody going to look to this? Yep. Jamin, are you? Thank you. And Yvonne, thank you, Yvonne.
Thanks, Chair. Hello, everyone. I take the report as read and just want to highlight a few things here. We've had a couple of meetings with management and some of you already, along with OAG, Assistant Auditor General Mark Moloney and Sector Manager Stephanie, in terms of the detailed context of the increase, as you can see. And these details are also documented in the letter they're provided here. In summary, there are a few reasons behind the increase that I want to highlight here. The first one is the increasing hours due to this increased complexity of the organization, including council's growth, areas of high risk accounting estimates, such as the variations for infrastructure assets and forestry assets and emission credit scheme, and changes to the accounting and auditing standards, such as PBE FIS 48 and IS New Zealand 315. Secondly, the increase in costs per hour associated with conducting our audit, such as the general inflation and skilled labour shortage, causing a significant salary increase. Lastly, I want to say that I want to provide a bit more context, is that in the past 3 years, our average audit hours set at 1,300,
versus the proposal here, we have put down to 1,050 hours. And the average time cost set at 210,000, which is the time cost only. It is not sustainable for Audit New Zealand to absorb significant amounts of our costs anymore while performing a high quality audit. I want to emphasize that while I cannot control the scope or nature of new accounting standards, I would like to work with you to ensure the audit process is as smooth as possible for you. It is just very important that these fees are set at a level that's reasonable for us and the council. I would pause here. I would imagine you guys would have questions to me. So yeah.
Karakia? Yeah, give that. Give it a fire. We know it's not. First of all, we can't just go down the road and get another auditor, can we? Because actually, you're the only one that has a mandate to actually audit New Zealand, rather. Is the only one actually that can audit our accounts. Is that correct?
The Office of Auditor General is your auditor. We are the one assigned as your appointed auditor, as like me, assigned as your appointed auditor. The Office of Auditor General is running an allocation model rather than a tender model. So they assign me to be your appointed auditor. Yes. For local government sector, apart from us, we are doing 65%. The rest are performed by UI and Deloitte.
Okay, budgeted 14144.
Oh, talking about that. Yes, that's the ending line. Yeah. Yeah.
My understanding is that the letter of engagement has been signed and that Audit New Zealand is now underway with our audit. Stephanie, would you like to say?
So just a couple of comments. One is that we did express concern with regard to the increase, and our auditor, Yvonne, has provided us with the advice that was given to you. We were also given the opportunity to discount it in this year, but to pick it up over time. I'm anticipating this will continue to go up, and therefore absorbing it in this year made sense. I will also note to councillors that this is a significant concern across all of local government. Local Government New Zealand and Taituara are raising it. Then the Chief Executives Forum for Canterbury is raising it. And we have had multiple letters to the OAG with regard to these costs.
Graham McGlynn.
Two things under the terms of reference for this committee, and you've got it there, Graham, conveniently saved me finding it on my screen. 6.3b sub 1, review of the appointment of external auditors, their performance and their fees. So this matter prior to signing anything should probably have come back to this committee. Second one is, and I can't get into any specifics, but two other councils who did have Audit New Zealand as their service provider, and due to capacity issues were reallocated. The external providers to Audit New Zealand accepted the Audit New Zealand fee, and in the renegotiation, both of them had fee increases between 20 and 25%. This does not compare well to 56% with Audit New Zealand. And I do wonder whether there is an inherent level of inefficiency in the audit processes of Audit New Zealand, and I'm not getting at you in particular, compared to the big four firms. The other comment is the big four firms, those councils have noted a significant increase in the service provided by moving to the private sector provider. I'll just leave those comments in Public Excluded or in a workshop forum. I might get a little more specific.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Well, it seems to me, Mr. Chairman, Nook's question, Councillor Karako's question, wasn't properly answered. He said, "Are we obliged to go to Audit New Zealand?" And there were people nodding and shaking around the room. But perhaps we could get an answer to that as to what our options are, regardless of the fact that the letter of assignment, letter of agreement has been signed.
We've signed a contract. We've signed a contract.
But according to Graham McGlynn, that should have come before this audit, this committee before that contract was signed. So I'd still like to understand what our options, even if we can't move there this year, what our options are for the future.
Well, just to answer you, I think maybe it's a matter that we have to consider outside this meeting. Councillor Robinson.
Is it reviewed annually and signed annually?
No, it's a 3-year term.
Why weren't we privy to this document before it was signed? Considering it's quite a big bit of budget.
Stephanie?
We had the chair of AFRC and the chair of the council in the conversation with the auditors, and it was understood that that was the process. I will check, but I'm not certain that it has been signed at this point. I will go back and check. But that was the intention of that meeting, having the chair of AFRC and the chair of the council in that meeting.
Please. It seems to me that we have two specialist advisors to this committee who have oversight into what other councils are doing, and in that capacity can bring advice to this council. And it seems deficient of this council that they've made a decision, or potentially made a decision, or about to make a decision, without actually taking advice from the two Grahams, who may or may not be able to provide an insight into what else is going on and what other options this council might have in this regard. But you know, an 87% increase in fees over 3 years seems extraordinarily high.
Councillor Kōrero.
Oh, kia ora, Chair. So I'm going to come back to the terms of reference of this committee. So Audit, Finance and Risk Committee terms of reference version 4 adopted Council 22nd of March 2023. So if you look at on section 6 responsibilities, 6.3 internal and external audit. 6.3b external audit. 1, review the appointment of the external auditors, their performance and their fees. 2, review of the annual audit plan with the external auditors. 3, review any reports from the external auditor. So I just pick up on Councillor Robinson's question, is that did we follow the right process by where there should have been a report actually that came back to this committee, because under the terms of reference, that seems to be the logical process. And the way I'm seeing this is that that wasn't done and the decision was made. And so that's possibly put us in a breach here.
I think we'll will take this matter and investigate it and come back to the committee with once we've confirmed process. Yeah, are there any questions of Yvonne? Is that yeah, okay with that? That's all we can do really. Any other questions of Yvonne? No further questions. Thanks, Yvonne. We'll just obviously have to yeah, just check on process.
Just through the chair. So can we actually be very clear on the process moving forward under that question that I actually asked, and what the response has been from the chair is that there will be a investigation as to whether there was a breach of our terms of reference of this committee. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what you're hearing. Councillor Robinson?
I just want to go back to the resolutions page, but if you flip it over, page 91, risk assessment and legal compliance, number 8, there are no risk or legal compliance matters identified. I mean, that's within the report itself, or the fact is, it says here that we're noting the increase in audit fees, but it doesn't say we're actually agreeing to them.
I think we'll just note that we'll investigate process. Stephanie?
I think there are two things here. One is, I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure it's within my delegation to do the signature, but that's not the point that you're making. And that's not what I want to push here. Rather, Chair, I think that it's through you, it would be wise to note both the intention of the review and coming back to the committee with the outcome of whether or not there was a breach and what the appropriate process was, should have been. Second of all, I note the multiple comments around the table with regard to the quality of the papers, and I would again suggest it might be wise to minute the expectation of the committee that the quality of these papers must improve.
Thank you, and we'll note that. Go ahead. Graham Naylor, did you have nothing else? So, Yvonne?
Can I just comment here? I guess I'm here just to go through the process. I guess in substance, we're here to discuss this paper. In my mind, it's not approved yet, so that's why I'm here to provide you more context. I'm happy to answer more questions if you may have in the next meeting.
Graham McGlynn?
Is Audit New Zealand prepared to revise this quotation down in line with the increases seen in the private sector?
To your question, firstly, I want to comment on to make a straight comparison to other council engagement. I don't think it is fair because other council may have the complexity and the content and scope of the audit may vary significantly. So I don't know that there should be a one-to-one comparable. Secondly, I did offer the phasing approach when we discussed with the management and grant and when OAG attended. So I can have another conversation with management again or the next time in this committee if you wanted to apply the phasing approach. But as Stephanie said, they would prefer to absorb the increase in the year one rather than the next 2 years. With that phasing approach, the first year will be down under around 30% to my memory, but I don't have the exact number now.
Graham McGlynn.
Due respect, I don't think that quite answered my direct question. But we do also have an option, well, we may have an option depending on the status of the documents, to do what another council has done and actually only sign a commitment for 1 year at this stage whilst we go through a formal review process to give us a bit of runway.
Thanks, Graham. Graham Naylor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to take issue with the comments that were made about the comparison of fees. Excuse me. As someone who's been an appointed auditor for over 20 years, I think that's a misleading comment.
Sorry, which one are you referring to?
Your statement that you can't do a one-for-one comparison. In your letter, the OAG is claiming that they have moderated these fee increases. So they've undertaken a similar process. But I'm sorry, I can't accept that.
Sorry, Yvonne, I've just cut you off. I think what we will do is that we've undertake what Nick was saying. We'll investigate further outside this committee, and I think we'll basically discuss some of the issues that we've been talking about, review the process if that is still possible. But in the meantime, we are simply, the recommendation is noting the increase in fees. That's all we're doing at this stage. So I'm going to put the motion. Yvonne and Gemma, you may leave the table. I think we'll call the discussion at a close. I'm going to put the motion that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee notes the increase in audit fees from Audit New Zealand for financial years 2023, 24 and 25. Do I have a mover?
Yeah, I'm sorry to be a pain, but by agreeing to note the increase, what implications does that have in terms of our discussions around how we, whether or not we agree with the Audit New Zealand fees for 23 to 25? Because that could be translated as meaning that we are noting it and thereby sort of agreeing to it, even though it's not a resolution to say we are agreeing to it.
Proposing.
I'm happy at this stage because I'm hoping that we might have in PX perhaps a more forthright discussion around some of our options. And I don't want to compromise our ability to make a different decision.
If we accept the resolution and note in the minutes that I think what we'll do, Ian, is
prepared to have this recommendation sit on the table until after we've been through PX.
I agree with that, sorry.
If information was available and would be provided that met the requirements of Laboima, that it was commercially sensitive and not available for the public, then you could choose to take this paper into PX with an undertaking that you would bring whatever resolutions out and information that was not commercially sensitive out following that, if that was going to be enable you to make a more informed decision.
Graham Naylor.
Chair, I can confirm that the information that the two independents will share with the committee in PX is commercially sensitive.
Councillor Kōrero.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. So what I would like to move in that direction is that this paper is taken from this forum and then put into PX because of the financial sensitivity. That's what I'm moving now.
We have to take an adjournment anyway, so we'll take an adjournment and just consider the wording for that while we're in adjournment. Thanks, members of the committee. We'll just come out of the adjournment, and a decision's been made to change the order of business and agenda item 8.9, audit New Zealand audit fees 2023 and 2025 will be moved to public excluded and taken after item 9.25 and 8.8. And no, not and and this has been moved under section 7.2B2 commercial sensitivity, under section 7.2I enabling commercial negotiations, 7.2H enable commercial activity to proceed. I want to assure the committee that the public so that's the reasons why we're taking it out into so let's move on to so I'd like to resolve now to move into excluded. We have a mover and a seconder to go into public excluded. Move, Councillor Robinson, seconded. Yep, Councillor Kōrero. Those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Now moving to public excluded. Thank you. We have now returned to the open meeting, and we want to bring out two items that we've been discussing. We're looking at item 8.8, Kōrero Mai Staff Survey Results 2023. And we just put up the resolutions for that. Is that correct? That's correct. So the resolution is that the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee agrees the following information can be immediately released into the open meeting. Receives the Kōrero Mai 2023 results. During the public excluded session, national context was discussed and is a sensitive matter and will remain in public excluded. Notes the committee has the expectation to receive the action plans that attend to the matters outlined in the report. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Robinson, Councillor Graham McGlynn. Any further discussion? None. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? No. Carried. Okay. Thanks very much. Just to advise, our next meeting will be on the 4th of October 2023. And those are the Karakia. Yes, Chair Scott. Thank you.
Nui kiti uru tapanui o tāne kia wātia, kia mama, tīna ka ti tīna na ti waiura, iti ara takata koirai rongo whakakaria ake kia runga kia tīna. Tina, Haumie, Huie.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to thank everybody for participating in this rather extended meeting. And thank you very much for the independent members for their dialogue today. Thank you.